Hello everybody, I'm Arnau Vidal, mycotoxin expert in Innovat, and today we'll discuss the new RISE program case of the month. The case of this month was farms from North Asia, and it was layer farms, and the animals were suffering a lot of severe symptoms. Although the producer were performing a lot of mycotoxin analysis in the feed, the results were not able to detect a high mycotoxin risk. So for the reason, mycomarker service, the combination of the feed and the blood analysis, was introduced in these farms, and here we can see the results of this mycomarker service. While the feed was only able to detect 3 different mycotoxins at low concentration, blood detected 7 different mycotoxins. Thanks to the blood analysis, it was possible to find a correlation with the symptoms that animals were suffering. So elucidate the real impact caused by mycotoxins. Because, for example, animals were suffering liver problems, and blood analysis identified aflatoxin that was completely missed in the feed, and everyone knows that it's highly toxic for the liver. Then, considering all this information, a strategy was built. First of all, SNS, detoxification technology, was introduced, and then a biomonitoring program was established. Here we can see a summary of the biomonitoring program. So SNS was introduced, and before SNS introduction, blood through FTA cards was collected and analyzed up to 36 different mycotoxin biomarkers. 2 weeks later, so 15 days later, blood collection was repeated. As you can see, in parallel, there was a control group using a mycotoxin binder at 2 kilos per ton. Here we can see the results of the biomonitoring program. Before SNS introduction, there was DON sulfate, the main metabolite of DON, and tonesonic acid in the blood. 2 weeks later, DON was completely removed from the blood, and tonesonic acid was drastically reduced. So the results confirm what we already demonstrated scientifically, that SNS reduced the levels of mycotoxins in the bloodstream because DON was completely removed and tonesonic acid drastically reduced. If you check the previous RISE case of the month, you will see that SN needed 3 weeks to remove completely tonesonic acid from the bloodstream. All this reduction of the mycotoxins in the blood were translated into a better health status. So as we discussed, the animals were suffering a lot of intestinal issues with a lot of vomits. And 2 weeks later, these vomits were completely removed. So thanks to the reduction of DON, also known as vomitoxin from the bloodstream, animals stop the intestinal issues. Also, animals were suffering liver rupture because of the long chronic exposure, but 2 weeks later, thanks to SNS, the liver was completely improved. All this reduction of the mycotoxin exposure and improvement of the health status was translated into a better performance. As we can see, the weight of the egg in the animals consuming SN improved 5%, while in the control group using another mycotoxin binder, the weight of the egg was not improved and the clinical symptoms were still present 2 weeks later. So all this case confirmed that SNS improved the health status of the animals, removed completely the mycotoxin levels from the blood, and all this helps to improve the performance of the animal. So if you want to check in detail the case of this month, please download the PDF from our website, and I hope to see you the next month with a new case of the month. So thank you for all.